Good morning, everyone. I'm John Galvin. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of the Public Sector team at Intel. And we're very excited to participate in the conference this year with AWS. We have a 10-year partnership where we've developed technology together from an infrastructure point of view all the way to services. And now having the opportunity to really collaborate on the work that we're each so passionate about in public sector, we view as a great opportunity. And really today, being able to talk about smart cities and what the opportunities are ahead with smart cities from not just an infrastructure point of view, but really from a citizen services point of view and how smart cities are going to change lives of people around the world. And as I've traveled around the world, it is a topic everywhere, not just in developed markets, but in emerging markets as well. And what we really believe is going to be transformational. Also something that's happening incredibly fast. And so for us, being able to leverage all of the work that we've done in technology and infrastructure, but also all of our ecosystem partnerships to contribute to this and ideally even accelerate that transformation is incredibly exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sri to get things started.
Thanks, John. Welcome. Welcome to AWS Public Sector Summit. How many of you have been to an AWS event or AWS Public Sector event previously? Awesome. And for those that are coming in here for the first time, especially welcome. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Sri Ilaprolu. I'm part of the public sector team at AWS, and I lead our IoT initiatives across the globe, working with customers, partners, ecosystem to enable innovative solutions to be built on top of the cloud. So for those that are not familiar, AWS has been working with public sector organizations around the globe for a long time. We have a long history of working with public sector orgs. In the state and local government space, specifically, we have hundreds of customers across the globe doing really innovative work on top of the cloud, leveraging our cloud services, reducing IT burden, lowering cost of operations, solutions that are more secure, more resilient to failures, and so on. So that's the theme. One thing that we are noticing in the last, let's say, couple of years or so is the surge in interest and actual implementations as it comes to what I would call data-driven decision-making processes, which is a process that has been in the private sector for a long time. It's really exciting to see that start to come into the public sector space, and especially in the state and local government space. So I'm really thrilled. That brings us to the topic of the day, which is smart cities, importance of data, analytics, and IoT. And more than me speaking up here, I have a really interesting panel that we've put together. Really fortunate to be able to get all of these gentlemen up here. I'll let them introduce themselves. Each one has a diverse background in their perspectives, their experience, and what they're doing in this space. So with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and take a couple minutes, talk about yourself, your organization, and anything interesting that you want to share. What I will do then is I will moderate this panel using a Q&A format. So I have some questions prepared, so I'll try to go through those. But more importantly, I urge you to think about questions that you may want to ask the panelists. That's the real benefit of this panel is your questions, let the experts here, thought leaders in the industry, respond to those. And hopefully, by the end of this session, we'll collectively learn some new things. So with that, Ben, if you can.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Ben Levine. I'm with MetroLab Network. And MetroLab Network is a group of 40 city and university pairs. So think about Washington, D.C. And Georgetown, GW, or Howard that are partnered in a network that are focused on how university faculty and students can help translate their knowledge and expertise around technology and analytics to local governments. And we were launched as part of the White House Smart Cities Initiative in 2015. And really as a response to the need for more technical expertise and sort of analytical perspectives in local government. And so we launched with 20 city university pairs. Michael, sitting to my left, was one of the initial kind of brain children of the group. And And since our launch, we've expanded to 40 partnerships. I'll sort of save some of the details for the discussion, but we're focused kind of primarily in two areas. One is how local governments can use data and analytics to better deliver human services to their residents. And the second is how what we call urban instrumentation, but IoT, the idea of using video analytics, sensors, how technology helps cities manage their built natural environments, kind of how do they think about interactions of humans in their space. And we're seeing a lot happen between cities and universities in that realm. So I'll stop there and save the rest for the discussion.
Thank you.
All right. Wow, this microphone works. It's great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Saku Ri. I work for National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. We call it NIST. I run a program called the Global City Teams Challenge. That is a incubation and identification and replication program of the smart city technologies and projects in collaboration with the cities and communities, companies and universities all around the world. As the name implies, this is a global program. So about 40% of the cities participating in the program is outside of the US, which means 60% is roughly in the US. About 120 cities participating, about 300 companies participating. Basically, any company you ever hear about from your TV and magazine, they're all working with us to create projects that is more replicable, meaning that we are not interested in the one-off projects. We want projects that is replicable to hundreds and thousands of cities. So the companies like, for example, Intel, which John works for, is a great supporter of the program, and also Amazon, obviously. We are working together. And virtually, there's a lot, every smart city that you think of in the US and the world, they're working with us. So at the end of the day, we work, the NIST is a government agency that is trying to improve the standards and the measurement science. And we are very much interested in, again, replicability and developing the market for smart city and internal things at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Well, good morning. My name is Michael Mattmiller, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Seattle. And in Seattle, we have Mayor Ed Murray, and when he came to office 3 years ago, he presented a bold vision for how our city should be safe, affordable, vibrant, innovative, and connected for all of our residents. And it's a very big vision. It's a vision that when you think about it, having a safe community, affordable community, we need technology to make sure that we're making the right decisions on how we allocate our resources efficiently and how we innovate and provide increasingly better service to our public. And it's no small task in Seattle, where we're a rapidly growing city. For the second time in the past 3 years, we're America's fastest growing city. We've added over 100,000 people in the short 7 years I've lived in the city, thanks in no small part to this really small cloud and retail computing company at the north end of downtown that you might have heard of. But when we think about the way technology can make our city better, more efficient, we recognize that we do need to become a responsible smart city. And what that means to us is how we are using technology to improve our community's quality of life. So whether it's an app that helps people take control of their life in our built environment, or using IoT to get more real-time data for decision making, that's been a focus for us over the past several years, and we'll talk more in a minute.
Thank you, Matt.
Good morning. My name is Chris Cinconi. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Plano. I've been doing work with Amazon for about 5 years now, both in the private and the public sector, trying to realize some cost efficiencies within government. I've been in IoT, I don't know, on the bandwagon for about the last 18 months, kind of went back and forth with like a lot of people do today. But I kind of see the writing on the wall with regard to how smart city initiatives are starting to take place and moving forward in different capacities. Some of the stuff that we'll talk about a little bit more is, I have a little bit different take on it, where I see the devices as more as an input for data. And on the flip side to it, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for agencies and organizations to do more with these devices than if they didn't have them in place as it was. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that cities might face going forward, especially for those kind of communities like ours where we lease poles or we have services that we outsource. So it makes it a little bit more difficult on what you get into place. Another initiative I'd like to talk to you about is, especially, I like what Ben and Soku was talking about. We have to get to a point where communities start erasing those boundary lines and start talking with one another. You know, partnerships with the independent school districts, partnerships with, different cities within your organization, counties, even the state itself. I think it's very important because I don't know if these initiatives will work if they're siloed like we typically operate on an everyday basis. Sorry, I got a fly flying around my head as I'm trying to talk to you guys, so, but thank you.
Thank you, guys. So yeah, so let me start out by asking what I think is a pretty simple, basic question, but something that has come up in a number of discussions with customers and the industry leaders in general, which is, and I'll give you a data point on this. If you just go to Google and type in smart city and hit enter, you get over 15 million hits, right? Right there is a wide variety of interpretations, definitions, the way the community views a smart city and what it is. So let me start by asking each of you if you can comment on, in your view, what is a smart city? And then the second part of the question would be, why should a city care to do whatever it is to do, they're planning to do to get to that point? So what are the benefits? What are the reasons why a city should embark on a smart city journey?
So first of all, I think I dislike the term smart cities. Everyone in the smart cities sort of world says, oh, I dislike the term smart cities, but everyone continues to use it. I think the reason I dislike the term smart cities is I think that there's this notion, and you hear it a lot with cities saying, we want to be the smartest city, or by 2020 or 2030, we're going to be the smartest city in North America. I think what it's really about is how are cities using data to make more informed decisions. And it has nothing to do with technology. It has everything to do with better management of systems that cities manage, which are highly complex. And so, to me, a smart city looks like a kind of system of systems that is highly data-driven and truly understands how many people are moving through streets, a housing system, or that say public housing as a sort of industry, say, or streets as physical infrastructure, or how much water is moving through a sewer system. And that's really where I think IoT in smart cities is compelling, is because suddenly we're going to be able to pull in data that we've never pulled in before, particularly around our built and natural environment. And then if you think about sort of the smartphones as sensors and people as sensors, you start understanding a lot more about sort of human interaction with cities. So I think that's what it looks like, and I guess the benefits are cities increasingly are the sort of lifeblood of communities, and we have younger generations moving to cities, and yet cities are still faced with some of the sort of legacy challenges around inequality and health and income, access to education, and also faced with new challenges around trying to reach the standards set in the Paris Climate Accords without the federal government's assistance. And so if those are the goals, then we're going to need to really think about how we leverage data as a resource. And that, to me, is ultimately what a smart city is about.
So smart city.
Sorry, I didn't mean to offend the federal government right next to me.
Can I go now?
Sorry, go ahead.
So smart city, for me, is pretty simple, actually, from the definition perspective. It's about improving the quality of life using and or adopting advanced technologies, including Internet of Things, cyber physical systems, and AI, data analytics, and so on. So when I say IoT, I think it is probably the central point or central factor of enabling smart cities and communities. By the way, when I say smart city, I'm not just talking about large cities. It's small rural towns, population with 5,000 people. That's all, they all are working to become smart cities. So IoT is actually pretty broad. I mean, think about it. You always think about connecting devices. That's just one piece of it. And you have to build on top of that data analytics and decision making and services. And also when you talk about things, they are not just small sensors. We're talking about a car, a vehicle, a drone. They are all the things. If you connect them up, it becomes IoT. So at the end of the day, it is important to focus on improving the quality of life using those type of advanced technologies, including things like artificial intelligence, data analytics, all that. Why would cities have to care about it? It's, again, pretty simple. There are a lot of problems in the cities. It's not a man-made problem. It's just that there are so many people in the cities, and the population is growing. Cities are faced with budget pressure all the time. So they're being asked to do more with less. So this is where these advanced technologies can come in and actually help. Even with the same level of budget, you can disproportionately create more benefits based on the budget and resources you may have. That's where and why cities should care.
So clearly we like NIST-based definitions in Seattle because we consider a smart city to be how communities are using, or how cities are using new technologies like low-cost sensors and data analytics to improve their community's quality of life. But in Seattle, we realized that being a smart city is beyond that nice marketing speak that we all have a love-hate relationship with. It's about using these technologies responsibly. And by that, I mean a couple things. We realize that cities have been using what we would now call IoT for decades. We've had street sensors embedded in our roads that tell us surface temperature, tell us whether a car is present. We've used SCADA systems on our hydroelectric dams up on the Skagit River, again, going back for a century now. So what has changed? It's this notion of that device that's been embedded in the road that used to have a hardwired piece of copper that went back to municipal tower is now being replaced by something with an IP address that we can communicate with at a more frequent basis, compute at the edge. And so how we use that data and how we understand the new risks that that device posed is just as critical as the device itself. And so in our community, we've put a lot of thought into what do these new IoT and data analytics plays mean from a privacy perspective, from a civil liberties perspective, and how do we engage our community in being part of the conversation? It's very easy for us to say we can do, or we can implement a new video solution to do analytics about available parking and about how traffic is flowing. And yet, if our community sees that as an invasive technology, it may not be a match for our community. So we're trying to be responsible and really thinking about those impacts, partnering with our community to make sure we pick the right solutions, and ultimately trying to put data out into the hands of our public. Our open data portal, I think at this point, has about 700 data sets, including a number of real-time pieces of data that our community can use to build their own solutions and their own analytics, because we know that not all the good ideas come from government.
I think that smart cities, to me, is more of a, not more of a definition of what these gentlemen explained before, but maybe even a philosophy or an opportunity. I think that smart cities are going to become the catalyst for discussions to happen in government. I think that there are going to be discussions around more innovation and better ways to use their data. Over the past several years, I've used a phrase, and it's no more true today than ever before, is that the next oil boom, I believe, in America is making data informational. I think at the beginning of this month, Accenture came out and stated that 1% of the data around the world is being analyzed and used appropriately. That's a relatively low number. How governments could use that information and make better decisions, there's a myriad of that. There is no shortage of data in government. But the analytical side, the data intelligence side, the machine learning side, the back end side to how all this information is processed is just as important as the front end. Many of you may be getting pressure to move forward into smart city initiatives that are coming from trade racks and journals that are being pushed from the top down, not understanding the infrastructure that needs to be put into place to be able to implement those tools and those new models that are being built every day. But it doesn't have to be something either. A lot of agencies right now are using Fitbits to tie it back to their wellness programs. A lot of organizations today are doing traffic, automation of traffic. A lot of organizations today are automating their water meetings. So smart cities has been around for a while, and I believe it's more on how to use that information and that analytics to move forward, to make better decisions into the future.
Great. So if I can ask perhaps each one of you a slightly different question that's a little bit more narrow to your area, your organization in general. Maybe I'll start with you, Chris. So what are you guys doing currently in Plano that will get you to use more data to decide based on data as opposed to deciding the way things have been done? And where are you, what kinds of interesting projects are you thinking about in the near term?
Sure. So I took over Plano about a year ago. We're still in the middle of a transformation, so we're getting the foundation kind of where it needs to be. But I built a business intelligence group within 6 months of being there. Different philosophy for an organization. Very important though, and in that business intelligence group, there's machine language staff members, and there's people that are learning artificial intelligence to make some better decisions with the data that's coming in. Some of the things that we're doing right now is, I would have to say, is that we're taking more geographic data and we're making different types of decisions on it. So for instance, with GIS, instead of it being more cartography based, we're making different decisions like the growth and pattern of sales tax momentum over a period of time, over 2 or 3 years, let's say. We do that by using information that comes back from both our purchases and our sales tax data, but now we're starting to implement different features around the organization for, let's say for instance, the smart meter program that's going on. We're going to be able to have more prediction on where our water loss might be in a particular geographical area. We're implementing body cameras, which not only are we going to be able to get more information on what's going on in the street, but we could actually get different types of patterns of information that we could analyze moving forward. Some of the things that we're thinking about in the future is I'm a big fan of Lex and Holly and a lot of the voice interactive type of products that are out there today. And I want to try to implement those in a couple different arenas. One of them is with our city council. So when people are talking at city council, that we could be translating that information for people to hear at home. Another initiative that we're trying to do with these technologies is making the data on the website more informational, where people could actually come back and say, who's my mayor or who's my councilman? And that gets that information from the website and gives them the opportunity to call them right from their Alexa device. So we're looking at different opportunities like that. I wish we were a little bit further along, but there's some cultural barriers that you face when you're in the middle of a transformation and you're trying to modernize at the same time. And I think that's probably important to talk about at some point too down the line.
Right. How about you, Mike? Interesting things in Seattle. I know you guys have been using and are very focused on data-driven directional guidance. So any interesting things that are happening in that space?
Yeah, so in Seattle, we're a What Works city, which if you're not familiar, was an initiative of Bloomberg Philanthropies to infuse government with more of that data-driven decision-making thinking. And so we doubled down on open data, and our mayor declared that all of our data would be open by preference, meaning that if we generate or collect a data set, that we should make that available to our public so that they can manipulate it and run their own analytics and give us good ideas to run government. Our mayor's office has stood up a performance team, which is doing a great job of partnering with departments to explore what data they have and how to use it in a more real-time basis to affect their operations. As you can imagine, though, and I think, Chris, you raise an excellent point, government perhaps is not the best at realizing the data assets it has and unlocking that potential. In Seattle, we have 55 different lines of business. We have a $4 billion annual revenue. And so if you think about the silos that come with all those historically independent groups, we still have a lot of work to do to identify where data resides and how to be more collaborative. That provides better service to our public. We have a couple of use cases right now where we're identifying constituents who are eligible for a service in one department based on income requirements and therefore might be interested in other types of services. We're also working with departments to modernize some business process. It may not sound terribly smart, but we have a fire department that historically has had medics go out into the field, and when they encounter somebody in a low acuity situation, they fill out a carbon form in triplicate, attach one copy to the person in need, send them in the ambulance, and then they scan the other copies into microfiche, and that's been happening for as long as we've all been alive. So we're finally working with them to deploy tablets in an EMR system where they will actually be able to analyze what are the types of calls they get most frequently, how do they better align resources to realize either savings or better call times and response times, and ultimately save lives. And that's an example of a project that we're working on with the University of Washington through the MetroLab Network partnership that we have. So my partner in crime on the MetroLab side at UW is Bill Howe, who runs the eScience Institute that has incredible teams of undergrad, graduate, and PhD students who work with big data and analytics, who have worked on homelessness initiatives, they're working on the public safety initiatives. And so we get fantastic results leveraging that brain trust through the collaboration. Just the one last thing I'll put on there, that's the data-driven side, which of course is really awesome, huge value, but if you think about a Maslow's kind of hierarchy pyramid, that type of data-driven decision-making is up top. It's all those layers beneath the infrastructure, as Chris was also alluding to, that needs to be in place to support that. So last year, we had our own transformation within technology. We combined our 650 technologists from across 15 city departments and developed one new central IT organization, in part because we realized that transformative new technologies like IoT can't be run independently across departments. We don't want the transportation department going out and putting out weather sensors and the electric department putting out weather sensors. Let's put one and figure out how we make that data permeate our organization. So right now we're focused on two things. We are considering IoT management platforms, so that way we get insight into the health and security of these thousands and potentially tens of thousands of new devices going out into our built environment. And we've created a position of Smart Cities Coordinator. This is a role that we are very close to hiring. We've got some great candidates. And their job is going to go out into our city and evangelize the art of the possible when it comes to smart cities. So what are the plays that we see value collectively as a city? What are the types of things these new technologies can enable? And then work with our community to make sure that these technologies are well understood and deployed in a manner that's acceptable to them.
Great. Saku, I know you have a unique perspective in that you're looking at it both from a federal perspective, not necessarily in a city, but then you also have visibility into what's happening outside of US, right? Sure. So you have a global view as well. So anything that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So from federal government perspective, we have to look at all cities and communities. That's our job. So the biggest problem that we are seeing in smart city and community, and also in Internet of Things, IoT in general, is the fragmentation. Fragmentation in many fronts, not just technology piece. Technology is fragmented, of course, but that's not the only problem. There's a market fragmentation, there's a business level fragmentation, and execution level fragmentation. And the question for us is how to reduce the fragmentation so that cities and communities can benefit from each other's development without reinventing the wheel over and over again. So there are roughly 19,000 local governments, including tribal communities and towns and small areas and big cities in the US, all right? And then almost all of them want to do smart city projects. And every time they want to do a smart city project, almost every time they start from scratch. They say, oh, I heard about this smart city stuff, so let's do it. So what do? We don't know how to do it. So they start from scratch and researching everything, going through all these try and errors that other cities have probably gone through a few years ago already. So this kind of fragmentation is preventing the exponential growth of both the market and deployment and efficiency of the smart city deployment. So essentially what we are seeing in smart city and IoT is incremental growth, where we actually have a potential to see this hockey stick. That's what you're really are trying to see. And that's the barrier. For federal government, one of the reasons that we are working on as a NIST is to help the community and society and the cities to get over that fragmentation issue by, again, identifying and incubating more replicable solutions. The solutions developed in Seattle and Plano, they've gone through a lot of effort to make that happen. Now, it may be possible that this solution may be replicable in the other 18,998 cities, for example, then that's a jackpot. That's what you want to see. And we can replicate that, and that's how we can grow the market. So I work for NIST, which is part of the Department of Commerce. Part of our job is to help the industry and the market to grow into the right direction. So that's part of our job and as a federal government. Now, going back to international issue. So this is an interesting phenomenon. US smart city movement is fairly new in here. Well, it existed for a long time, but all this momentum that we are seeing these days has been around probably only a few years. In Europe, this kind of momentum has been going around for over a decade, okay? And by the way, EU is a very top-down approach, meaning that they typically have assigned a big budget, and then they actually give the money to the cities to implement these kind of stuff. And it's good and bad. Good in a sense that they actually have the money to get things going, all right? That's a good thing. Bad thing is most of the, I would say most, a lot of those projects are not very sustainable. They do these projects because they have money without really thinking about what's going to happen after the money runs out, okay? So companies come in, deploy sensors for 2 years, say, works great, I spend the money, and move on. And the cities are left with that thing in their city, and which is not sustainable from financial perspective. And that's what we're seeing a lot of times in Europe and also in Asia. So US has started a little later than other parts of the world, but we're catching up fast. That's what I could say.
All right. Ben, anything interesting that you've seen in MetroLab that you care to share?
Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile to talk a little bit about this concept of how cities can work with universities. I think if you think about the strengths of a university, you would say universities are able to drive new knowledge or create new knowledge in any number of fields. And what are the weaknesses? Well, universities are not going to turn around projects in a matter of hours and maybe even weeks, but they work on longer sort of term timelines. If you look at a city, the strengths of a city or the unique assets of a city are that cities are really good at community engagement. They're really good at understanding what the needs of the local government are. They have a ton of expertise around managing the existing infrastructure or systems or programs that they operate. What are they not as good at? Well, probably many cities are not as, maybe lack engineers or lack some kind of expertise in emerging technologies that no one expects them to have, but universities happen to have. So the idea of a city-university partnership is how can we take the expertise from a university and plug it into a city? And it's not just about saying we're going to find a one-off project that you can work on, but it's really how do we create institutionalized partnerships where local government is actually sitting down with universities thinking how can faculty and grad students and undergrads actually help advance the mission of the city. And that's the core of what MetroLab is about, is how do we drive those partnerships? And then how do we connect what's happening in one community or another? So I'll just talk about a few examples that I think are particularly interesting. And I think what you'd see if you happen to go to MetroLab's website and explore the many projects that are underway in our network, I think one thing you'd notice is that many of the issues that universities are helping address in their communities are issues in those cities. And they're clearly issues in those cities, but are sort of the pressing issue that's unique to those communities. So here's a couple examples. In the Miami area, the universities that are part of our network, of which there are a number, are working on how we can use sensor technology and other technology solutions to detect sea level rise. In the city of Chicago, the University of Chicago is working with the city to deploy a network of sensors that are looking at air quality and transportation and trying to look at correlations between congestion and air quality and other issues. That project, which is called the Array of Things, has distributed nodes to other places. One of them is Seattle, and Seattle's using them, among other things, to look at precipitation. In South Bend, the city is working with Notre Dame to think about how they can take advantage of the fact that they sit upon some of the richest fiber in the country to develop advanced wireless infrastructure. In Boston, the Northeastern University is working with the city to think about how what they call corporate gentrification affects housing prices and retail kind of rents in the Boston community. In Pittsburgh, where they're trying to manage, I think the second most number of bridges in the world and aging infrastructure, they're using technology to detect bridge degradation, road degradation, and more. So in many cases, these solutions sort of are born out of necessity between city and university, helping drive new solutions that otherwise may not have been provided through the procurement process or by city government alone. And that's what we think is really valuable about city-university partnerships. There's tons of examples, but I think that sort of gives the flavor.
Awesome. So I know we started out saying data is at the core of all of this, right? So no matter how you get the data, it's the data that helps you decide what's right, what's not. Some of you have talked about fragmentation or silo systems, right? So there is a trend that we're seeing in our work with customers, the concept of a data lake. The fact that you're able to pull together data from a variety of sources, sensor-based, existing systems, external systems, and so on and so forth, including cross-city collaboration happening through data lakes in some cases, regional level, right? Any thoughts that you'd like to share on, number one, do you think, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Anything that you've seen work successfully and not work? And then the second part of the question would be, what do you see as the role of a cloud in this whole ecosystem? Because some of the data sets that we're dealing with customers are massive in scale. So where do you see cloud acting as an enabler for technologies that are being rolled out, IoT, AI, ML, et cetera, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on, but also dealing with the existing data that cities want to leverage that they have not been able to deal with in the past? Would you like to start, Ben?
Sure. I mean, I think ultimately the goal in any of this is integrated data. That's really what all cities and even we should be getting to regionally. Here's an anecdote, or here's one example that I think suggests that integrated data is the direction that every city or county should be moving. In Allegheny County in Western Pennsylvania 20 years ago, I think sort of by either accident or intentionally with incredible foresight, they integrated data across all their healthcare systems. Similar to, I guess, the kind of it was a combination of a bunch of different agencies that happened, and suddenly the agency had a ton of integrated data. Now, with the advent of machine learning and predictive analytics, they're actually able to go in and say, okay, I want to be able to triage, child protective services when I get a call about abuse and neglect. I want to be able to sort of assess how seriously I should be taking certain calls, knowing that I can't deploy sort of measures everywhere, and they're able to develop predictive analytics kind of scoring systems to target particular folks in the system. They're looking at homelessness, being able to predict people's likelihood of becoming homeless or staying homeless, and are able to use integrated data for that purpose. They're also doing something or thinking about doing something that is sort of a sad reflection of issues in our country, which is looking at sort of the likelihood of success at birth in terms of your likelihood of sort of going into the human service system, which is, I think, sad but true, and we don't have the data to back it up, but we probably know anecdotally that some people are much more likely to utilize human services and sort of fall victim to certain issues than others are. And those ideas are only possible with integrated data. So cities have to be moving in that direction. We have to be moving it, or beyond cities, counties, regions have to be moving in the direction of integrated data. And I think that the cloud is really the enabler. And I'm not sure that you can solve this problem without the cloud. One challenge, obviously, is that human service data, for example, is sensitive data. And it's not just, I'm not saying that because it shouldn't be in the cloud. I think that's probably a more secure way of storing it. But when you're thinking about sharing across agencies, there's a lot of concerns about what is in, kind of what's in the data. Can you reconstruct someone's profile based on a set of integrated data that you couldn't do independently? So I think there are solvable challenges there. But ultimately, if we're going to become data-driven, it can't be that we understand systems in silos, because it's just not sort of viable in the long run.
So data.
Right.
That topic is worth 3 days and nights of discussions alone,
Right.
obviously. So is it useful? Data link sharing is useful? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's an extremely important piece of the equation. in replication and scalability of the smart city solutions we're talking about. Now, I got to echo what Chris said earlier. Data and information. Data itself, I mean, everybody talks about like data as a new currency. That's wrong. Data itself doesn't have any value in it. It's a ones and zeros. That's it, right? The true value is created when you extract a usable and actionable information out of that. That's where data analytics is, all right? Along that line, I think this cloud comes into play because cloud is naturally one way. I'm not saying that that's the only way to enable the data to be exchanged and shared and linked in certain cases, not just between the departments, but among different cities. Why is it important to link between cities? Because once you understand what other cities are doing at the data level, it's a lot easier for your city to replicate and even, to some extent, do the similar thing as what other cities are doing. And at the global level, that, the more data you have, the more easier to do machine learning. That's what it called. There's a team in San Francisco that's working on a disaster management based on machine learning. That's one of the part of the Global City Team's Challenger team. And it is getting a lot of traction because the more data they can get, not just from one city, but regional data. For example, there are more than 20 regional local governments around that area. When disaster happens, it does not stop at the borderline of the city. It goes over the borderline. And same with the flood management that Virginia Beach and Hampton is doing in Virginia right now. There are 7 cities working together to come up with a flood prediction solution, which can be replicable in many other cities. So coming down to data, linking is extremely important. I just want to add one more point. One natural question always comes with the data is the security and privacy issue. And it's going to get more and more important going forward. The way I see it is that smart city solutions and IoT in general is rushing really hard to get the solutions working. So to get it out and make business cases. At some point, they're going to figure out that that's not necessarily enough. You have to think about how to secure it. I mean, we all talk about it, but how much time and resources are we actually investing in it? That's really, it's not just, as a city level, it's a company and university research level. So I think that will be one of the big important point of at the next phase.
So I think to your question about data lakes specifically, yes, can be a great tool and technology. It goes back to what's the problem we're trying to solve. And one of the projects we've been so fortunate to be working on with the University of Washington and a number of companies in Seattle that actually sprang from the US DOT Challenge is creating a trusted data collaborative where we can have both real-time traffic data pumped into a data lake and supporting data stores, as well as historical data, so that we can enable both research and the vision is ultimately predictive analytics and a mobility as a service where we can nudge people to different mode splits. We're at the architecture stage, very exciting. That said, we have very specific use cases to focus on. We can think about data ownership, we can think about retention considerations, and ultimately the impact to our public. Saku, to your point, around privacy. Where we get more queasy is the notion of this creating a data store where we put all kinds of different data in hopes that if we run an analytic, we're going to learn something and we don't know what. That is where our public gets concerned, and that's where, as government, we do see potential issues. And we really need to be careful about what data we're combining based on source, based on what picture that could paint for our public. In Washington State, we have one of the most progressive public disclosure laws in the nation. So most any data we collect or generate can be requested by our public. So we don't necessarily want that one data set where someone can get the full picture of Michael Mattmiller, where he lives, what he ate for breakfast, how many government services he uses, and how many times he's called 911 in the past year. So we have to think about this responsible use of that data. To the point about the cloud, how funny is it? I was working in federal technology about 10 years ago when Vivek Kundra, our first US CIO, had his cloud first mandate, and everyone went, wow, can we really do this? Is it FISMA compliant? How do we get through all these regulatory schemes? Compare that with President Trump recently in his executive order saying we need to be in the cloud for security purposes. So we're very comfortable as long as we can trust our cloud provider to meet our standards and our regulatory requirements. But also, we do look at cloud as ways to move more rapidly on technologies that are not either time efficient or cost efficient to deploy on premise.
Awesome. Comments, Chris?
Yeah, and I want to give a little time
Okay,
back to
yeah,
questions,
okay.
but real quick,
Sure.
I won't belabor the data side, but I think moving to the cloud is pretty important for most organizations moving forward. It allows us to get back to our core competencies as a government, and it also gives us the opportunity to shift dollars from CapEx to OpEx to give back to the community. So I definitely think it's something worth looking into if you haven't.
Awesome. I want to open it up and see if any of you have any questions. There are some microphones that are around, so raise your hand if you have a question and we'll get it over. I think there's one here.
Hi, Sil Verma, Ohio. Michael, I think you touched on healthcare just slightly, but otherwise noticeably absent from smart cities with a discussion about healthcare. So I'm curious, for leaders in smart city, what do you view as the biggest opportunities for leaders in healthcare to get involved in smart city?
I think for us, it's the integration between emergency management and hospitals. So as we're moving patients back and forth to the hospitals, more telemetry, more analytics could be sent to the hospital before the patient gets there, and better knowledge and better information being sent back to the paramedics that are interacting with that patient is one small component. You know, we could get larger into hospital systems. Some governments have their own hospital systems, some governments don't. But for us, that integration, I think, would be very important moving forward.
Yeah, and love that you're from Ohio Health. I'm from Dublin, where there's a good Ohio Health hospital. Aside from, I think that's a great use case and part of what we're doing with our new EMR system in combination with the county and several of our local providers, but also this public health angle. We heard a little bit from Ben about the Array of Things program, where we can put sensors to help understand pollution and environmental quality across the city. And one of the use cases we've identified in Seattle is around heat islands. So how can we understand where, because of construction or new populations, certain communities may be suffering? There's also a great example from the MetroLab Network I love, University of Louisville, I think, and City of Louisville, where they were able to put GPS trackers on asthma devices so they could track usage and see where people were having attacks. And as you can imagine, they identified patterns and trends where they could then take action to reduce asthma attacks by affecting air quality and other factors.
Okay.
So I just want to make one point. Out of the about 150 teams that we created or we identified, I see there's some trends. So almost like a ranking of the sectors, that which sector is the most popular and most invested. Top is transportation, by far. That's what you see. That's the most popular, and that's what everybody wants to tackle. Second comes down to disaster and emergency public safety angle, and energy is a close third. And then comes down to data management and data governance issues and all these kind of things. And very interestingly, healthcare doesn't really go on top of the list all the time. And we try to understand why that's the case. That's the definition of healthcare. If we include environment and air pollution into healthcare, then that becomes fairly a big issue. But if you narrow it down to like hospital management, for example, then not many cities, well, counties do that, but not many cities are directly related to, many city government is related to hospital management. I think that's one of the issues, that healthcare is not necessarily seen as the top priority. Well, it is one of the top priorities, just not in terms of investment from the city government perspective.
All right, so we'll take one last question.
Actually, this is Mukesh. This is a question for you.
Okay.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the Intel partnership? Is it like bringing computing to the edge? Is that what the partnership?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Intel and AWS have a very strategic partnership, has been in existence since the beginning, and it continues to grow even further, right? So on the cloud side, that partnership has been in existence for a number of years, will continue to, and we collaborate very closely on the hardware side, the infrastructure side of it, bringing innovation into that side. As we get into the IoT side and edge becomes relevant for certain use cases, once again, going back to the partnership, there's an absolute alignment when it comes to, for example,